Good evening. Welcome to Enfield Congregational United Church of Christ this evening. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. My name is the Reverend Dr. Greg Gray, the pastor of this church, and I am so thankful to see each and every one of you, or at least see part of you this evening. Welcome to this installment of the Rhoda Smith concert series. Some of you who are sitting in this congregation tonight knew Rhoda well. Others have just seen a name on Facebook somewhere. Rhoda was a matriarch of this church who didn't pass that long ago, but gave us an endowment for a concert series. We've had a few of them along the way, even when COVID was at its height, and we just had to broadcast those concerts. But we are now grateful that we get to have people actually in the space for our concerts. So we are still remembering Rhoda and thankful for her gift to us. Friends, these concerts are free to the public, but they are not free for us to put on. So I know that some of you saw as you were walking in the door that there are plates at each of the doorways that say that if you would like to contribute, that would be helpful for us as we are going to continue on with this concert series in the days and years to come. So folks, as you are on your way out, if you will see those plates on your way out, whatever you can give is appreciated and truly voluntary. This is a free concert. Friends, just one or two announcements before we get started. Tomorrow, we are not done with our Halloween festivities. Tomorrow, we are going to have our fall festival. It doesn't look like the weather is going to be cooperating with us as much as we would like for it to, so all of those activities that were going to be outside are now going to be inside. We will have kids trick-or-treating through the building. We will have games and hot dogs in Fellowship Hall, but even though we are going to get some rain, we are not going to let that dampen our spirits. We are going to celebrate Halloween in style. So invite your friends, your loved ones, your best child next door neighbor and ask them to come on. That fall festival will be 3 to 6 p.m. tomorrow. Then make sure that you have your calendars marked that we are coming up on the church's fall Craft Fest. Craft Fest is one of the biggest events that we have in the life of the church each year. That has been going on since its inception in 1953. So Craft Fest is nothing new around here. Most folks know when it's coming. That is going to be on November 12th and 13th. Make sure that you have your calendars marked for that. And we will have a big couple of days, those 2 days as well. Friends, that's enough announcements for one evening. We are here for music and not to hear from me. So, friends, without further ado, let me introduce to you our organist for the evening, Wesley Hall.
Well, thank you all so much. I am so happy to be here in a real physical room with a real group of actual human beings in the room. And also, it happens to be my first concert ever where I've had occasion to wear a cape, and I'm also delighted about that. So if you see any extra movements, it's just so I can enjoy the drama and gravitas of it all. We have just heard a piece that might remind you a little bit of the famous Toccata and Fugue in D minor. This was Bach's C minor prelude and fugue. I call C minor the second spookiest key because it's not D minor. But we will hear that at the end of today's program. The next piece has quite a spooky tie, and so I've tried to be, strike that balance where we're not too morbid and macabre, but where there is a little bit of a spooky story behind the pieces. Well, this one is a little bit maudlin, but the composer is Marco Enrico Bossi, and he was a very, very flamboyant concert artist from Italy in the late 19th century. And he should have lived longer than he did, but as you might guess, something ill befell him in the Atlantic Ocean on his way to the United States to play a concert tour. The ship sank. But this piece, a scherzo of his, is extremely spooky and would have been very appropriate for the Gothic dark arches that were in style at that time. So I'm going to play for you now the scherzo by Bossi. And who knows, maybe somewhere in the Atlantic, his spirit will hear it. That's a good one. Now we turn to something from the flying Gothic cathedrals of France. This has a very mystical sound. It's by Jean Langlais, and it's a simple prière that he wrote. But faith and religion was very complicated at that time, isn't it always? And when I hear this piece, I like to think of the state of religion in our world and the confusion that it brings sometimes. And this piece, if you ever get the chance to hear it just echoing in a really vast room, it's a really sort of a mystical experience. And so taking a break from some of the Halloween silliness of the evening, this piece is a marvelous time to reflect a little bit and to express a prayer you might have as well. So please enjoy Jean Langlais' Prière. So it's time for me to let you in on a little secret, which is, you know that toccata and fugue in D minor that I mentioned earlier? Well, Bach didn't write it. And someone who loved Bach a lot wrote it and really, really wanted to sound like him. But you know when things are just a little bit too good, and you say, well, and the setting of that piece that you'll hear later, it's a little bit of a sort of romantic take on Bach and trying to kind of emulate him, but also add a little bit to it. It has a little bit extra. Well, I thought because of that, I wanted to play one of Bach's most distilled and pure and perfectly written fugues. And you might know it, it's called the Little Fugue in G minor, the third spookiest key. And it's appropriate for Halloween, but it's not very long, but it's just one of those moments where it's pristine, perfect writing, and it's just, you see this little window into a mind that was incredible. And so here in the middle of the program, I'd like to play for you Bach's Little Fugue in G minor. Before we move on in the program, I wanted to let you in on another secret, which is that if you are an organist for a living, you do indeed encounter many bats. And I had the opportunity to be in Germany last year, and actually during the pandemic, I was stuck in Germany. I was going to go over and study, and then I couldn't leave the country because if I did, I wouldn't be able to get back, and it was a whole thing. But I was trapped in a wonderful place, which was the city where Bach went as a young guy to go learn. And so they gave me the keys to the 15th century, basically 14th century church where these ancient organs still stand. And they have a special code for the alarm system in case a bat flies across and triggers the alarm. You enter. So it's the Fledermaus, the flying mouse code, which is what they call bats in Germany. But you do see them, and I got to tell you, nothing feels more like organist and spooky than when you're playing and they come actually out of the pipes in a 15th century space, and they fly around you, and it's terrifying. So, hopefully no bat incidents tonight. We're going to go now before, and long before Bach's time, before Bach was even born, to a composer named Samuel Scheidt. And Samuel Scheidt was a great composer. He lived in difficult times, though. And he lived during the 30 Years' War, which absolutely decimated Europe in every way. In population, there was great famine, there was plague, pestilence, and crops were wiped out. Everyone's children went to war. There was death and destruction everywhere. So, needless to say, there wasn't a lot of room in the budget for elaborate music, hiring a lot of instrumentalists and choirs. And so people like Samuel Scheidt had to be very, very creative with how they wrote. And a good deal of his music, as you would expect, is very earnest and serious music that has, handles kind of deep spiritual themes and kind of making sense of all this death and fighting and warfare. But sometimes he wrote music just to lift people's spirits a little bit. And I think for us in 2021, after 2020, we need some of that music. And so the next piece I'm going to play is actually a pop song from before the 16th century that was popular and known to everybody. And the title is Also geht's, also steht's, and it basically means, well, whatever happens, happens, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so this piece, what you'll hear is a bunch of variations. You can tell this music's really old. It sounds like you see images of like a castle hall and things like that. And it comes from an old folk tradition, but we'll go through with several variations. I'm going to play 7 of the variations, including the theme. But you'll know, don't worry about counting them. You'll know when it's done. The final one is in this big triple dancey meter, and it's very grand and would have been a little bit spicy for a church at that time. But this piece is a wonderful one, and you'll get to hear a lot of the color stops and all the kind of interesting sounds on this instrument. So it's also a good time to focus on those. Organists shouldn't be too ostentatious during church services. We don't want to distract from wonderful sermons, Reverend, or anything else. So this is a time where we can hear a lot of what the organ can do and a lot of those colors. So, Samuel Scheidt's Also steht's, also geht's. Now we will go far into the future to Johannes Brahms. And, Brahms really, we think about these famous composers, WCRB in Boston will say the three Bs, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. But Brahms hasn't been gone for that long, if you think about it. I mean, he was less than a generation before my grandmother was born, for example. And at the end of his life, he started writing organ music. And he wasn't proud of it. And this is a person who would spend endless hours and days and months working on each page of each one of his 4 symphonies. You have Beethoven before writing 9 symphonies, but Brahms only writes 4, and the whole time he feels this anxiety of who's behind him and who's judging him, and now he's going to be lined up against Beethoven, right? And he didn't publish his organ music. He wrote it for himself, and it's an interesting window into maybe a personal side of a composer, of an artist, as much as you can see. It was published after his death, but you find a lot of hints, I think, of his own thoughts and his own fear of mortality, perhaps. There are, even in a piece like the one that I'm going to play that has a more or less joyful text, you still have these old musical tropes like the bird singing da-dum, da-dum in the Garden of Eden, or not, in the Garden of Gethsemane. And you also have quite a bit of unsettled textures. And so we don't know, we can't ask him, and I don't think he wrote much about these personally, but it's neat to think and to wonder. He made some mistakes, he wrote, in his life, and towards the end he reflected on it, and I think he sort of got a little bit religious, and the organ was a place for him to explore some of that. So as I play this chorale, I invite you to see what you might see in the mind of an artist, and it's something I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to interpret it myself. Every time I play it, it feels different. So it ends with power, but not joyful power. So I hope you'll enjoy it. And I'm sorry, I realized I did not say the name. It's O Gott, du frommer Gott, which means basically, O God, you friendly, you kind God, I pray to you. And so, on this spooky evening, we come to our final piece, the Toccata and Fugue in D minor. So I'm sorry to have burst the bubble that it's in all likelihood not written by Bach, but I wanted to talk about why. Have you ever gone into a church built in like 1900 in especially in New England? We have a lot of these churches, these big, grand stone churches in some of the, especially the mill cities, Springfield and Worcester and Providence, and they look really old at first blush, but then you go in and you say, oh, well, actually it was clearly built not so very long ago in the aughts or 20s, and it was very hip to go back and kind of remake this ancient style. And that's kind of what's happening here. The forms are like what Bach might have written when he was really, really young and very excited and had just come back from Lübeck, Germany with the bats. But it's a little bit more luxurious. What I mean is it'll repeat a thing a bunch more times than maybe is necessary and do it with a little bit more like 19th century flair. And then it has markings in it that are oddly specific. And you'll have all these staccatos written in and then legatos. And so the things are very, very long and then very, very short. And those seem oddly like how music was actually written in the 1840s, 50s, 60s. And so what we have is this thing, but then over time, it just sort of becomes a work of Bach in a way. Like, you say it enough times, you play it enough times, and we'll never know who actually wrote it, and whoever wrote it really liked Bach's music. And so I think I can actually say to you now, essentially, this is Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, and I'm happy with that. And I like to think that Bach himself would say, you know what, sure, why not? So, the Toccata, familiar to us, and I'll try to play it as spookily as possible. And then the Fugue is very dramatic, and I invite you to think of it as sort of a staged work, almost, where you'd have maybe like things like capes and curtains and drama, and each line enters as its own character, kind of. And so it's really like just before films where you have this very dramatic stage presentation, and one character bursts on from one side of the stage and shouts something else, and then the character from before comes out, and it seems like all is lost, and there's a grand pause, and then the hero discovers their newfound strength, and there's victory in the end. So I will leave you with Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Thank you all so much. I have so enjoyed being here with you tonight and playing this lovely organ in this breathtaking space.
Again, thank you for coming, everyone. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow at Fall Festival.